Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email us tmosso at the1916company.com for purchase and pricing details. Today, we discuss the kind of watch I love to present: traditional, rare, exquisite, and exceptional, and it is mechanically exceptional. Launched in 1995 and built through 2005, this is the IWC Portuguese Minute Repeater, reference 5240-05 in pink gold. This watch was an edition of 250 pieces, and it combines IWC's all-time iconic watch with the most exquisite of complications. So as you can see, this is every inch a Portugueser, which means from the original reference 325 of 1939 to the present, it has always been a purpose-built oversized wristwatch. In fact, it was the first purpose-built oversized wristwatch. Other giant wristwatches of its period were pocket watch conversions. So 42 millimeters in diameter, 12.9 millimeters thick, and you could see a plexiglass crystal. More on that in a moment. 51.1 millimeters from lug to lug tip with a 22 millimeter spacing between the lugs. Now on my wrist, which is 16 centimeters in circumference, you could see it fits nicely and it fits large, which is the idea with the Portugueser. It should not look like a Datejust on your wrist. The watch is elegant and graceful, with curved lugs that help it to wrap around the wrist. You should probably have a wrist my size to wear this. My size are larger, so let's say 16 centimeters circumference and up. And while it is not an ultra-thin watch, it is under 13 millimeters, and it has a concave bezel and a generously sloped plexiglass crystal, so it will slide easily under a dress cuff, the epitome of elegance. Old school IWC, the kind John Mayer would laud and not complain about. That said, I love all watches and I keep an open mind, but there is no denying that this watch feels as though it were brought forth from the 1940s or the 1950s intact. Taking a quick look, we have a strap here that is IWC factory, black calfskin on the bottom, large rectangular scale, symmetrical scale alligator on the top with a semi-gloss finish, a little bit of bolstering to give it some volume, and then we have a monotone stitch with a profile that is sheer cut and black lacquered, high-grade construction. This is an expensive cut of the alligator with this combination of large, symmetrical, and rectangular scales. We have an IWC polished and satinated pin buckle right here. The Brogioli B signature on the bottom. Now the case, very similar to the much smaller Patek Philippe 96, which was also a product of the 1930s. This idea of a sober, form-following function aesthetic was popular in the period and seen across a range of models from different manufacturers, but what strikes me is the longevity of that 96, forms of which are still in the Patek catalog, as well as the Portugueser design. The watch was originally, the Portugueser that is, requested by two gentlemen named Rodriguez and Teixeira, who were the Portuguese importers of the International Watch Company's products, and they wanted a wristwatch that was as accurate as a pocket watch. At the time, the only surefire way to do that was to put a pocket watch movement in a wristwatch. So a purpose-built wristwatch case was created for an IWC pocket watch caliber, with the consequence that it was a very large watch. Now, only a few hundred of these were made until 1993, which was a jubilee year for IWC, when production of the Portugueser resumed in earnest. And 2 years after that, the Minute Repeater, IWC's first series production wristwatch Minute Repeater, joined the Portuguese lineup as this reference 5240. So that is the history of the Portugueser. Now, a lot of those period elements from the 30s are still here. You have lugs that are blended into the case rather than stepped out. You have an unbranded crown. You have a bezel that is concave to visually pair the mass of the watch, a contrast between polish and satin. We have a plexiglass crystal to help clear the exceptionally tall stack of hands necessary to have a time display atop the dial side minute repeater mechanism. It is under the dial, so all of this stacks like a tower on top of the repeater, which is why this dive watch style vaulted plexi is necessary to clear clear the hands. That's why that is there. Now, other elements from the 30s include the dimple-style minutes track, small seconds, vertically oriented Arabic numerals, and leaf-style hands. You also have the old-school International Watch Co. logo with the city of origin Schaffhausen, as these watches have been since 1868, when an American, F.A. Jones, founded IWC. They have been made in northeastern German-speaking Switzerland in Schaffhausen. Now, we do have one subsidiary setting function here. We have a hacking seconds function, so you can stop the seconds and set the watch to a reference time. Note on the bottom, which might be the world's largest wristwatch movement hacking lever. You can actually see it moving into contact with the balance to stop the oscillation. Now, no less an authority in repeating calibers than Renaud Papi was brought in to help develop the IWC Minute Repeater module, which bowed in 1990 on the 3770 Grand Complication. Well, that Renaud Papi Minute Repeater module makes a return here, but again, it is on the dial side, which is why you don't see repeater gear on the reverse of the watch. Now, if you want to impress your friends with your repeater, what you're going to do is you're going to set it to 12:59. So you should get 12 hours, 3 double chimes for 3 quarters, and then 14 chimes after the most recent quarter. So let's see if I got it right. I still got it. So the repeater, a minute repeater, will chime the number of hours, quarters, and minutes after the most recent quarter. So 12 hours, 1, 2, 3 quarters of an hour, and then right up to 59, 14 final chimes. So that's how the repeater works. And it will chime the time so that you can hear it, innovation developed in the era before luminescent watches. Now on the case back, we have an enormous pocket watch based caliber 95290. So still coming from IWC pocket watch stock. It has a lot of traditional pocket watch elements, like a center wheel architecture where you have crown wheel. We have the barrel with the ratchet wheel on top. We have center wheel, third wheel, fourth wheel, escapement, and the balance itself. We have a 54-hour manual wind power reserve, a beat rate of 18,000 vibrations per hour. We have the stop seconds function. When you include the repeater joules, you have 54 joules, and all this adjusted to the high horology and chronometer standard of 5 positions, so it's very precisely adjusted. For stable timekeeping in every position, it features a hand-formed Breguet overcoil hairspring, which has a more centered mass than a flat hairspring and thus keeps better position timing tolerances. Now, the other thing is that there is no water resistance. On a minute repeater, traditionally, dust and moisture only, but no actual immersion or liquid water. So keep it dry. In order to conduct the sound through the case, 0 water resistance is specified on most repeaters. Now, the finish here is excellent. The movement is truly huge. 37.8 millimeters in diameter, a purpose-built manufacturer movement for an oversized case. Taking a look at some of the elements, we have lovely stripes, and you can see these are abrasive wheel stripes laid down by an abrasive wheel that makes overlapping passes. That's why one side of each stripe is dark and one side is light. If they're stamped, then they have the same shading gradient all the way across. Now, if you look, you can see that the bridges have been beveled, and that we even have interior angles on the finger train for the fourth wheel and the escape wheel, as well as over the center wheel. But the bevels have been sort of media blasted, and the same treatment has been applied to the wheels. This is a pocket watch inspired vintage driven treatment. So while the finish is manual, the finish might not be immediately recognizable as what is modern high horology. It is done in the style of a pocket watch from the late 19th or early 20th century, though you can see clearly that the wheels have been internally beveled and that we do have our sharp interior angles and hand-laid bevels on the bridges. They're just done in an anachronistic fashion, designed to look back. Again, International Watch Co. across the bridge. You could see we have a sun ray graining on the barrel cap, and then a sort of matte solarization on the ratchet wheel with golden chaton cups for the individual pivots, a nod to the era when this was how jewels were precision set in bridges, first pressed into golden chaton, which were precision cut, and then those into the bridges themselves. There's engine-turned perlage on the base plate, and we have black polished screw heads for good measure. The best of the best from IWC, and my favorite kind of watch to share. Reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase and pricing details.